Perfect. So when we talk about talk time in the classroom, and I almost guarantee that's how almost all of you start your ELD class. So we talk about the relationship between oral proficiency in English and students' reading and writing proficiency. There's generally a strong correlation between the two. We've also noticed, and we also acknowledge that students' speaking skills are generally their first interaction with literacy in their new language. Um, I don't know how many of you have tried to learn a second language, but you generally don't start learning a second language with reading and writing. Um, we know that increasing talk time in the classroom really helps build students' confidence. It encourages interactions and collaboration between peers. It helps students be able to refine and clarify what they're already thinking. And it provides multiple opportunities for students to reuse and recycle vocabulary. So I'm going to ask you a question, and this is a little activity that you could do with teachers as well, or people in your class. What percentage of class time do you think should be structured student talk time? And you can unmute or you can put a guess in the chat as well. When you have an idea, you could give a signal in the chat, or you can just write your guess in the chat. And I'm always modeling how students can, or you can provide sentence frames for students. So you might want to put like, I think, or I believe, or it seems to me, or in my opinion. Nice. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Jessica. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to leave you with a quote from Nancy Motley. She's the author of Talk, Read, Talk, Write, that I'll reference again later in this presentation. And if you do want a copy of that book, it's a long novel, but there's some good pieces in it that you could just skim through if you want. Just let me know and I can get one out to you. Nancy Motley says that the idea is to make sure that each time the spotlight is shined on a particular student, that student leaves the exchange having experienced success. And I think in your ELD classrooms, this is done really well. We are so supportive. It is such a supportive environment in an English language development classroom. It's not often that we're setting a student up for to be answering a question when they don't have that answer, right? And so this will work for student exchanges, but also between student-teacher exchanges. And just coming back to that percentage-wise is, yeah, research does say to us that it should be 70-30%. So that means 70% student talk time and 30% teacher talk time. So I'm trying my best today to engage in some talk time with you guys, but this is a little bit of a different environment. It's hard to wrap our head around that. And so I think we go through sometimes, sometimes you're trying to get your class to be quiet as a teacher, but we want structured talk time in the classroom. And so some ways to structure that talk time or open up a class with talk time would be sorting, sequencing, and ranking activities. On our Padlet, Danielle shared an excellent activity that she worked on with her ELD students where they sorted those UC cards that I shared at our last collaborative. And so that's a great way to get students using some deductive reasoning skills. So you're keeping the rigor high for students, but you're also then pairing it with direct language instruction. Oftentimes we use a visual prompt or a video prompt to have students respond. Would you rather is always really fun for our opinionated teenagers in ELD. Brainstorming, games, and hands-on activities are awesome as well. So this is that book I was speaking to you about. Nancy Motley wrote Talk, Read, Talk, Write. And what this book talks about is emphasizing the integration of speaking, listening, reading, and writing in a learning process. And so you can see that I've kind of processed it onto the side. And the way that I think of it, or kind of the analogy that I think of when I think of Talk, Read, Talk, Write, is almost like a layered cake. So when you're teaching your lessons or when you're planning your lessons, you almost want to think of them as a cake. One layer is talk, one layer is read, one layer is talk, and then we finally get to that bottom layer of writing. And so for every time students write, they should talk, read, and talk about it again. And this is a familiar practice because when we do writing prompts with students or even on PATs, we often have students come together, collaborate, discuss, and then write. So really, this is a pretty familiar process. And I think in our ELD classrooms, because we have the freedom to structure them however we want, it's a great practice to model. So first you'd want to have students discuss or engage in a topic. Then maybe you're reading some sort of relevant text on it individually, collaboratively, whatever works for your students. Then you're talking again. Have students be able to consolidate what they just read, digest what they just read, but learn from each other. And then finally, students might have learned some of the vocabulary from their peers, have new ideas from their peers, and that discussion, they might be able to put pencil to paper then. When I say structured talk time versus just having your kids talk and just letting it go where it might go, I'm talking about modeling discussions. And so you'll notice that every time I prompt you guys to talk, I generally pair it with a sentence frame, or I have a word bank, or some visuals to go with it. And I'm just trying to model how I would kind of want to see it in an ELD classroom. You'll also want to allow for lots of wait time. So remember that students are translanguaging. So when you say something in English to them, it generally takes some of their cognitive load to then translate that and then respond. So I notice that when I respond in Italian, I respond very slow. And I also need to think about, generally just need to translate what that person said to me. So you're going to need longer wait time than what would be normal in a conversation. Provide lots of opportunities for practice. If you do something once, do it again 10 times before students might feel fluent in it. Create some rules for engagement. And when I think about this point, I think about creating that culture of conversation in your classroom. So I definitely notice some ELD teachers will say to me, my kids don't want to talk. And I totally understand that. Their students have an effective filter. It is very nerve-wracking to speak to your peers in a whole new language. But if you're creating that culture of conversation in your classroom and really starting your day with talk time every single day, students eventually get to start to notice that they're not going to get out of this eventually. And they might become more open to kind of participating in that talk time. You can vary the size and the composition of your student groups. And I know ELD looks different in everyone's building, so different size groups and things like that will depend on what it looks like in your building. And you want to select engaging and relevant topics. And when I say relevant topics, I mean topics that students might have some background knowledge on. So if it's a totally new topic, students won't have the language to speak about it. So just remember that. Some really familiar activities, I saw these in the chat, so I'm going to go super quick through them, is hot seat, telephone, chat stations, sort and explain, Pictionary, categories, telephone, guess who, headpans. Those are all really fun activities that you can do. I'm going to focus in on chat stations for a moment because I think it's a little less familiar. But if you're familiar with the idea of kind of having like uh, a vertical surface, essentially, common in some of our math classrooms. That's what a chat station is. And so they can be used for so many different things, but there's a lot of research that shows that having students stand up and collaborate around one surface where, say, they only get one whiteboard marker and they have to come to one conclusion, really elicits students to speak to each other. And so some ideas for it is you'll see that on the slide or on the picture there. Generally, there's a picture prompt and then there's room for students to write. I would encourage you to give them one whiteboard marker per group. And so they have to discuss before they write. You could post an image or you could post an artifact. You could post a quote. You could post some sort of infographic or an article, a map, some sort of would you rather or which one doesn't belong, and then have students respond below as a group. This generally makes them have to discuss with each other. To go along with this idea, I did create some templates for you. And so they're linked in the slide deck. And so these chat station templates would just allow students to also reflect afterwards, but they could also write on them while they're at the chat station. So for example, if I was doing a unit on, say I was doing a unit on world foods, I might put a picture of which one this and like which one doesn't belong, and then students would be able to reflect afterwards. You could have 6 chat stations in your classroom, and students could move from chat station to chat station. So you'll notice that this sample template on the right has 6 boxes, almost like a read the room activity, but instead it's like 6 would you rathers. And so another fun activity that you might want to try with your kiddos is mystery box. And so I've played this with my grade 5 class many years ago, but it was almost like we had a paper bag. It didn't need to be a box and it could be any item. And I started it, but then eventually students brought in these random items. And so the idea is that students would have to use some of that descriptive language and questioning to be able to guess what's in the box or the bag. And so say I put in a fork in the bag. Um, kids would start asking me questions. Is the item from your house or is it from school? I would answer. Is the item heavy or light? I could answer. Is the item hard or soft? And so you could give kids some word banks if you wanted. You could give them some of these sentence frames. This slide actually you could just put up. And then you could rotate. Whoever gets the correct answer, tomorrow is your turn to bring in the mystery item. That's like a month's worth of talk time right there for you. Some other talk time activities that I know that you guys are using in your classrooms would be Would You Rather, Two Truths and a Lie, Continue the Story. Desert Island is a fun one where you're trying to guess a word. And so you can ask questions like a word that has a double consonant, or is it a word that ends in ing? And students would have to guess the word. Which one do you wish? And so there's 4 options. Which one do you wish? Unlimited recess time on Wednesdays, meet your favorite celebrity for lunch, go to an amusement park with any friend, or the ability to relive one day. Tell me why. And then some other fun activities that I thought I'd share with you would be the Fast Five. And so the Fast Five is actually where I got this, which one would you wish? And also where I got that first talk time activity where we shared how we were feeling today. And many of you said eager to learn. And so it is a subscription. So it's free, sorry, but it is a subscription that you would just put in your email. And then every morning, at 8 a.m., they send you an email with about 7 activities. And so I find that within those activities, there is always 2 talk time activities. And so it is focused on students like social emotional wellness. And so there's generally a check-in and then there's generally a question, like which one would you wish? And so it's in your inbox every morning at 8 a.m. And you can also go back and look at the archive of past ones as well. And generally, they theme them on holidays when there's something coming up. So I linked that website if you want to subscribe to that. It's just kind of nice to have your talk time given to you every morning at 8 a.m. There's some other great resources in there too. The New York Times Connections or Puzz Grid is really fun. And so I'm just going to open it up to show you guys what it is, but it's the same game. One is made by the New York Times and one is a website where other people make them. My suggestion is that you would use Easy for ELD students. And so if you just open up a random one, you have to check through them before just to see if they're doable for kiddos. The idea would be to put students into groups, say 3 to 4 students, and the idea is to group words that all connect. So for example, I could do tomato and celery, carrot and lettuce, and those ones in my mind connect because they're vegetables. So you could also try other, I don't know, maybe carrots, banana, pineapple, and Oh, am I missing one more fruit? Let's try this. Oh. So you're connecting the ones that make sense together. I don't know which one is a fruit. And so students have to discuss it if you put them into groups together. The New York Times one is the exact same type of game. This one, Ron from Holy Family shared with me, Quizlet Live. It's very similar as well. But Quizlet Live you would need Chromebooks for each student. So essentially each student will get
Aurelia, you muted yourself, darling.
Thanks, Trish. I appreciate that. Did I leave off at Quizlet Live? Did you hear me talk about that?
You just started it.
Thank you. So Quizlet Live, you would need a Chromebook for each student. But what happens is that you, as the host of the Quizlet Live, would post a question on the smartboard or projector, and then students would get into groups of say 3 or 4. It puts a different answer on each student's Chromebook. So students then need to discuss which would be the correct answer. So if you said which holiday falls in the winter and it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, and let's say Indigenous Peoples Day, then you could have the students would need to discuss. They would each get a different answer, discuss, and then choose the correct answer. So that's a fun activity for you as well. Something really simple I did in my ELD class when I didn't have any technology was I had multiple laminated alphabet boxes. I had big ones, I had small ones for kids to use. They could just be photocopied. I would pick a category and then I would I'd see how many words a student can come up with in a certain amount of time. So I'd say to students, okay, the category is beverages and you have 3 minutes. And so they would need to organize how many beverages that they can think of on the alpha box. I never counted spelling. I just wanted them to get down as many words as they could. And it got really competitive in my classroom. Connect Four is really fun. You could do it just as a talk time activity at the beginning of your class, or you could also do it at like throughout the entire period. And so what you do is you're going to provide students with a list of on-topic words. So say you're going to provide students with a list of wildlife, or you're going to provide students with a list of descriptive vocabulary. And then what you're going to do is you're going to ask students to use them in a sentence. And so each time a student uses them in a sentence, they get a sticky note, and their job is to connect four on the grid that you drew on the whiteboard. I linked in here some advocacy statements and survival language. I think it's really important that you guys be really the person that uh, helps students learn this. And I think that because they're going to feel more comfortable and safe to learn and practice this language within your ELD class, but it's a really important skill for students to take into their content classes. So if you could teach them, can you say it another way? Or can you slow down when you speak? And have them practice that advocacy language. They'll be better off in their classes when they're not with you. And so I linked the poster that's on the slide deck here, and then some other advocacy statement cards as well for you. So when I send that out, they'll be linked for you. If anyone wants to stay on, I am happy to help you set up your Division 3 gradebook on D2L. If you can't stay on now, I totally get it. We all have things to do. I'm happy to come out and visit you and do it in person. Just let me know. Um, we want to weight it appropriately for students listening and speaking, reading and writing. And so I will send this out here, how I would weight it, how I would weight your grade book. But if you need help, I can import my old ELD D2L grade book, and that way you don't need to do anything. I thought I'd put a plug in for some upcoming EAL PGs. So on October 29th, we have EAL series part 2 of 6. And so you'll find the link for that in the LS Weekly. On November 5th, if you or teachers in your school are looking for support with collecting and annotating evidence, We are hosting a session for that on November 5th online. And then I just wanted to share with you that I previously had wrote on our EAL Year at a Glance that our ELD Collaborative for November would be on the 21st. But unfortunately, I've had to move it to November 19th. And so I shared with some of you that in the winter months, I will host them online. And when it gets warmer in the spring, we can come back together in person. I think that's safer for everyone and maybe just a little bit better for us all. And so I will send all of this information out to you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you're exhausted at the end of the day, but I am hoping that you were able to leave here with something that you can take back to your ELD classroom next week and start doing. Thank you so much. And